Hey, how are you? My name's Felt, and welcome back to 14. This is going to be a very laid-back, relaxed, chilled-out video. This is going to be a tier list of power rankings and viability as far as endgame content goes. It's going to be biased and personal, because obviously I have my own opinions about how powerful and or how weak certain jobs are. However, I'm going to try and be a little bit objective about things. Just a wee bit objective. We'll see how that goes though, because it's always hard on a tier list like this to have personal biases be avoided entirely. Because there's no true power rankings tier list for any game that avoids personal biases. Let's start with talking about the tanks. Now, S tier is... Let's start with talking about the tanks and what the rankings mean. Well, let me rephrase that better. Rankings mean S tier is I would never ever be mad to have this in my party. A tier is that's a great addition to the party. B tier is it's fine. C tier is not the biggest fan, but no complaints. D tier is maybe you should bring a different job. Now, I want to clarify, this is power rankings, but that does not mean any of these jobs are unviable. Just because I say I'd rather you bring a different job, it doesn't mean I think that your job is unviable. And don't let me crap all over your favorite job. If you like a job, you like a job. Don't let me take that away from you. Now, let's start with tanks, and the number one S tier tank is Dark Knight. Now, that might be a weird decision, but ever since they made the change to Living Dead, Dark Knight is absolutely an S tier job. It brings incredible damage. It brings pretty solid mitigation both for itself and the party. TBN and Oblation are pretty powerful tools when used in a party-based environment, as well as things like Dark Missionary just providing great AoE mitigation, and its personal damage being pretty heckin' strong. Buff to Living Dead made it a lot more viable recently because of the way that you can now just kind of self-sustain yourself out of Living Dead instead of relying on essentially a benediction from your healer. Next tank to talk about is Warrior, solid A tier. Warrior is not really an S tier because it's just not quite as good as Dark Knight. In my opinion, Holmgang is amazing. Its personal DPS is a little lacking. Its party mitigations, while a very powerful shield, often requires you to burn your personal mitigations to make the shield powerful enough to really help make a difference on certain mechanics. It's still very good. It still does its stuff very well. It's probably one of the best main tanks in the game with how much it self-sustains. But I don't think it's quite as powerful as the way Dark Knight provides tons of party mitigation and tons of damage. Gunbreaker. A tier but below Warrior. It has everything that Dark Knight has going for it, but it requires a higher level of execution and a higher level of pre-planning, and it also really requires you to almost always be in boss melee range, and some mechanics are just hard to make sure that you keep in melee range in the current Savage and Extremes. I want to clarify, this is not a tier list that includes ultimates, because I do not have any experience with them. It's mostly talking about Savage and Extremes. Gunbreaker's a solid job. It has tons of great self-sustain, hasn't really changed since Shadowbringers in that regard. It brings solid damage just like it used to. But I personally rank it below Warrior, but only barely, and that's because Super Blide, while cool, does immediately put you to 1 HP, and Heart of Corundum and Aurora, while powerful, will not self-regen you without the help of a healer. It's a little weird in terms of getting your personal DPS out. So if you see someone joining Gunbreaker, 9 times out of 10, they're either going to be amazing because they've practiced the job to no end and understand the ins and outs of the rotation, or they're going to fumble through, overcap their cartridges, not have enough cartridges for their burst windows, and just generally cause problems. That's why it's a solid, like, just below Warrior and A tier. Paladin, B tier. I want to put it higher, but I can't in good faith when one of its party mits is reliant on either someone healing you, or you being in magic phase, or just wasting a GCD to heal yourself. Wings are a very powerful tool, but you have to stop DPSing to use them. And its personal damage is kind of lacking. Keep in mind, this is my personal opinion of how I'd rank these tanks. My static has a warrior and a paladin as R2 tanks, and it works just fine. We've cleared the entire tier well before the tier became uncapped. So don't let me saying that I rank Dark Knight so highly and Paladin so low take away the fact that these jobs are perfectly viable and you can clear any tier in the game with them. Let's talk about healers next. S tier healer, Sage. Job is busted good. Its shielding is insane, its mitigation is wild. It has 2 different forms of mitigation in the kit that are very powerful, one of which applies a regen and the other applies a healing up buff. Its fairy is great at hands-off healing. You can provide really powerful burst healings through recitation. It has great potential to keep your tanks topped off. It brings Chain Stratagem to a party, which increases the rate at which you crit, which is just really useful for getting more crits out there. Scholar is just really, really, really strong. I think there are very few healers that compete for that S tier slot other than Scholar. It is just incredibly powerful, and if you know how to play Scholar, you are an asset to every party out there. Next healer, in terms of power rankings, probably Sage. I just think Sage is great. I think it provides so much mitigation to the party. I think Panheima is incredible. I think being able to have Karakale and Holos as 2 different party mitts, one of which is on a 30-second cooldown, is nuts. I think Zoe Numa is a surprisingly powerful heal. It does require 2 skills to go off, don't get me wrong, but it's surprisingly powerful. Cardia is just a great way to keep your tank ticking and have less manual heals for them. Haima is great for just keeping your tank topped off through sections of the fight where you can't really stop and heal them. Sage just brings a lot to a party, and I think it's incredibly strong right now. Don't think it's quite as good as Scholar, but I think it's a solid A tier. White Mage. A tier, but below Sage. The same way that Gunbreaker is below Warrior, Sage is below Scholar. Oh, sorry. White Mage is below Sage. I'm recording this early in the morning. I just woke up. I apologize for misspeaking a little bit. Sage is just below Scholar. No, and White Mage is just below Sage. Golly, words are hard. But White Mage, while very powerful and provides tons of burst healing, it doesn't have as much mit. And I know that's kind of on purpose because it's a burst heal job, but it doesn't also provide any party buffs. But it does provide so much raw healing, and it pairs very well with Scholar itself. Because even though Scholar has great mitigation and shielding, its burst healing, while powerful, is only every once in a while, compared to White Mage's ability to essentially pop out their wings and be able to burst heal for the next 20 seconds. Be able to pop out a Flatus like crazy. Combine that with their great personal DPS. The way that Liturgy of the Bell works, the way that his size works, it's a very powerful job. I'd just rank it slightly below Sage. But that's only because I find Panheima and Karakale to be incredibly, incredibly powerful tools. That if your co-healer helps top off the party more with their resources, Sage can just blow other healers out of the water. Keep in mind, these two are almost exactly the same power rankings in my mind. But I would barely give Sage the edge, just because of the fact that it brings such... Since they are both similar jobs in terms of just bringing personal DPS and healing tools, I find that Sage's personal and party mitts to just be that tiny bit better than what White Mage brings, but that's just my opinion. I believe they're both great healers. I think they pair together very well, too. Astro gets a solid B tier, but this is my personal bias coming in. Astro's a great job. Macrocosmos is amazing, Earthly Star is amazing, bringing divination and cards to the party is amazing, but I just cannot find Astros that don't just stumble over their kit and get dragged across the finish line. And as far as, if I was going completely unbiased, you can play the job as optimally as possible, bam, S tier. Astro would absolutely be an S tier healer if you were playing as optimally as possible. However, it's kind of down in B tier because this job is really hard to play optimally. And even though it brings so much to the party, it's literally stumbling over your keyboard 24/7 trying to get out all your cards and your astrodynes and your arcanas and your divinations and your stars. And while it provides so much for a party, what does it do that White Mage doesn't? Brings cards and a party buff. Its personal DPS is so much lower than White Mage's that, I don't know. It feels B tier in the same way that Paladin feels B tier, and that it's very viable, it's very bringable, but it's just not as good as these other options. Let's go to Fizz Ranged. Machinist, I'm sorry, get out of here. I mean, Machinist is fun, Machinist is great, but Machinist has so many problems as a job, it doesn't bring party buffs like the other Fizz Ranged. And on top of that, it's very, very ping dependent, meaning that unless your ping is perfect, it's just not going to do it. This D tier is mostly based on the state of the job, and the fact that it is just... It's fine, you'll clear content with it, but it's just not as good as the other Fizz Ranged. I would rather have a Bard or a Dancer in my party every day of the week. Dancer. A tier. Dancer is just an A tier job. It buffs your highest DPS performer. It buffs the party with great party buffs. It has a party heal as well as the party mitt. It brings so much. It brings so much to a party. It's just nuts. Bard. Solid B tier. It's like Dancer, but slightly worse, in my opinion, in terms of what it brings to the party. Dancer bringing Curing Waltz as well as constantly buffing your highest damage party member places it slightly above Bard in my opinion. And by slightly above, I mean high enough above Bard that it actually gets its own tier above it. You might notice that nothing's in C tier yet. That's because I'm bad at dividing up tiers. But let's move on to casters. Black Mage. I love Black Mage, but when you're seeing people in Extreme and Savage and you see a Black Mage, you know it's a 50-50 toss-up as to whether they're drooling on the ground or they're actually pumping damage. Doesn't bring anything to the party, requires lots of pre-planning and being stationary. In terms of just true, raw, unfiltered power rankings, in my opinion, Black Mage is kind of C tier. It brings great personal damage, but I would probably just rather have my caster be on either of the other two. Especially with how movement-heavy fights are right now. You can easily pre-plan around them with Black Mage, but if your Black Mage isn't doing that, they're just going to be dropping casts left and right, and possibly even dropping their Anukian. Keep in mind, this is very late in the video to be bringing this up, but I'm someone who PFs a lot, so I run into all sorts of scum of the earth out there in PF. So keep that in mind. Casters, we're moving on. Summoner. B tier. It's fine. It brings a party buff. That's kind of it. It has a res, but with the way that the job flows right now, you're not really going to get them to use it. They're going to be swift casting Garuda for DPS. It's not necessary anymore, but it's still a DPS gain if you can clip the end of your party buffs. It's fine. It's essentially a Fizz Ranged in a caster shell. You have 3 casts per minute if you're playing on the 2.5 GCD speed. It's fine. It's nothing special. It's just a solid B tier job, kind of sitting there with Astro, Paladin, and Bard, where, like, I'm not going to complain if they're there, but if someone brings any of the other options, I'm probably a little happier. Speaking of other options that make me happier, Red Mage is absolute goddamn lootly S tier. Raising on cooldown of their freaking dual cast, a party buff, pretty solid personal damage, a defensive cooldown that reduces magic damage and increases healing. Red Mage is an S tier job. If I see a Red Mage on the party, I'm always happy. Always. This job is so powerful right now, I'm astounded that its personal DPS is as high as it is. It's so freaking good. Alright, let's move on to melees next. My personal babies, of which I love all of them, except Samurai. You go down in D tier. The changes to Samurai make me sad. Chitin being gone is awful. The fact that it auto-crits now and makes it not a good dance partner is frustrating. It's fine. It's the same as Machinist. It and Black Mage, they do the damage, they hit the buttons, but like they don't really bring anything else to a party. And while good players will make great use of these jobs and really be able to pump out damage and make your kill times be super fast, I just cannot rank them very highly. They don't bring a ton the same way that the other 3 jobs here bring. Reaper, you're going in C tier. You're a fun job. I enjoy you. Arcane Circle is great. It has the same power as Summoner's buff. However, the fact that you are a gauge negative job, the fact that hyper optimization involves around fitting through communios in the 2-minute pot window, the fact that that doesn't work in most fights of the tier because of the phasing. 3 of the fights of this tier, you can't do the 2-minute communio nonsense without hyper pre-planning around it. It's just rough. It's good, it's fun, but it's having a rough time right now. And even though it brings Arcane Crest, which is a party AoE heal, the other 3 DPS that I'm about to talk about very obviously deserve their spots better. Dragoon. Solid A tier. Solid A tier. It'll buff your other melee or your highest damaging caster by 5% with Dragon Sight. It'll give your party a crit buff, and on top of that, it's pretty solid personal DPS. Dragon Sight is kind of insane. I'm going to be very biased here for a second. My static has had a Dragoon and a Dancer as two of our DPS this whole tier, and I'm someone who swapped between Monk and Ninja for the tier, and having both of those buffs being pumped into me and just seeing my numbers skyrocket as a result has been very satisfying and makes me very, very much like these jobs. As someone who can very much perform on their job of choice, it makes me just really think that these 2 jobs here just provide a lot. Alright, so this is going to be a little contentious, but Ninja is going to only make it into A tier. Job's incredible. The Mug buff is the change to Trick Attack turning into Mug, making it 20 seconds, is actually insane for ninjas. They provide so much more party damage. However, S tier is jobs that I'm like never mad about. They provide so much to the party, it's insane. And Ninja just is a tiny bit below that. Just a tiny bit out of that compared to something like Monk. Monk goes into S tier because it provides Mantra as well as a party buff as well as great personal damage. If you know how to play Monk, Monk is one of the best jobs for melees right now. I think it's just insane. I think it brings so much to a party. And I think any prog group, any reclear group would be very happy to see a Monk in there because they just make life easier. Mantra makes it so that your healers have to heal less. Brotherhood is just a great party buff that doesn't even really require much thought. Just stand in range of the Monk and all of a sudden they're doing even more damage, as are you. I think Monk's just in an amazing spot right now, and I think it's just really powerful. Now, these are their tiers. This is where they're going to sit. I'm going to now order them within their tiers. For S tier, Scholar, #1, best job in the game, essentially. After that, I'd say Red Mage. And then I'd say Monk. Whoop. Say Red Mage, then Monk, then Dark Knight in terms of S tier jobs here. This is like left to right, best to worst, quote unquote worst. And then top to bottom, best to worst as well. So, A tier, top of the A tier, Ninja. Dancer, just barely behind it. Followed very closely by Sage. Then Dragoon. Then White Mage. Then Warrior, then Gunbreaker. In my personal opinion. This is very biased of a list, but I'm trying to stay true to what I think the power rankings of these jobs are. I think Ninja and Dancer are kind of interchangeable. They are both just barely edged out of S tier, in my opinion. And some days I might consider Dancer S tier, TBH, but I still think it's just a solid job. I know I'm super biased about Monk, but I think people just sleep on the job. I think people sleep on Mantra. E tier, Bard, right at the top. Can I get Bard up there? Bard right at the top. Followed by Astro, followed by Summoner, followed by Paladin. C tier, Reaper, and then Black Mage. D tier, Samurai, then Machinist. So this has been like 20 minutes of me ranking jobs in the game, and I'm going to re-clarify at the end of this video here. Just because I rank these jobs like this doesn't mean that they're bad or unviable or you shouldn't ever bring them. This is just how I view them in terms of power rankings. Best jobs in the game that you will always be happy to have in your prog re-clear groups. Anything in S and A tier is something that you'll be happy to see. Anything being below is like, it's fine, but... Or, it's fine, but I hope the person's good at it. C and D tier are essentially the jobs are fine, they'll definitely do their thing, but I really hope the person's good at it because these jobs are difficult. And they're typically personal DPS jobs, so if the person doesn't perform, it causes problems. Whereas, even a bad red mage can provide mitigation, a party buff, and raises. Even a bad dancer will buff your strongest party member and give the party its 2-minute buff, you know? Even a bad Dark Knight has access to TBN and Living Dead. Scholar still has all of their crazy tools. But it's also based around the fact that these jobs optimized at the highest end will become insane. So it's a combination of all of these different things, and this is just a general power rankings tier list. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a little bit of weird content. It's something new for me. I'm trying out some different stuff on the channel as I try and upload one video a day throughout the entirety of June. Bet you weren't expecting that if you haven't been watching my stream, which is where I play this game that I'm tier list ranking. Either way, thanks for hanging out and watching. If you liked it, leave a like. If you didn't like it, leave a dislike. If you want to argue that your job has been poorly placed, yell about it in the comments. Subscribe if you want to see more content, and I hope to catch you in the next one.